It began on a crisp autumn morning when the news broke. A renowned cardiologist, Dr. Robert Langston, had filed a defamation suit against one of his former patients, Emily Turner. The filing alleged that Emily had made false and malicious statements about Dr. Langston's professional conduct, specifically accusing him of lying about her diagnosis and suggesting that he had labeled her condition as non-existent. Court documents circulated online, and the medical community stirred with curiosity. Headlines splashed across news outlets nationwide: top doctor sues former patient, and cardiologist's reputation on the line. Dr. Langston was no ordinary physician. For over 20 years, he had been celebrated as a leader in cardiovascular research, appearing on talk shows, writing medical columns, and mentoring young doctors. He had saved lives, performed groundbreaking procedures, and received prestigious awards. His name carried weight at conferences and medical societies. To see him reduced to litigating in a civil court over alleged defamation was astonishing. Meanwhile, Emily Turner was a schoolteacher in her mid-30s who had sought Dr. Langston's expertise after experiencing unexplained chest pains. What started as a routine consultation spiraled into a bitter dispute. According to Emily, Dr. Langston dismissed her symptoms as anxiety, insisting that her heart was perfectly healthy. Months later, she received a startling diagnosis from another specialist: a rare cardiomyopathy requiring immediate intervention. Convinced that Dr. Langston had been negligent in denying her condition, Emily had taken to social media and local news stations, asserting that the doctor had willfully misled her. Dr. Langston's lawsuit demanded public retraction and substantial damages. He claimed that Emily's accusations had tarnished his reputation, cost him speaking engagements, and undermined patient trust. In his opening filing, he described the statements as malicious falsehoods designed to ruin him. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through the community. Patients who had trusted Dr. Langston felt torn, while Emily's supporters rallied behind her, decrying medical arrogance and the silencing of patient voices. Legal teams mobilized on both sides. The doctor's attorney, a seasoned litigator known for high-profile libel cases, prepared a confident opening brief. Emily, represented by a small legal aid organization focused on patient rights, steeled herself for the fight. She could not afford a private attorney, but the moral support she received from local activists and former patients of Dr. Langston buoyed her resolve. News outlets descended on the courthouse steps the morning the trial opened. Cameras captured Dr. Langston arriving in a tailored suit, his face composed but guarded. Emily followed later, clutching a folder of medical records and looking determined yet anxious. Both parties entered the building under a swarm of flashing lights and whispered questions. Nobody could have predicted that this case was destined to deliver one of the most dramatic revelations in recent medical legal history. Chapter 2: Patient's Accusation, the Illness That Sparked Controversy. Emily Turner's story began quietly. She had been a vibrant teacher with a love of weekend hikes and early morning yoga. But in late spring, she began to experience tightness in her chest and an unsettling shortness of breath. At first, she attributed it to stress and overwork. She started taking longer breaks and tried meditation, but the sensations only worsened. One morning, she nearly collapsed on her way to school. Concerned, her husband insisted she see a doctor. She scheduled an appointment with Dr. Langston based on his reputation for thoroughness. When Emily described her symptoms, sporadic chest discomfort, fatigue, and occasional dizziness, Dr. Langston ordered a battery of tests. An EKG, echocardiogram, and blood panels. Days later, he met with her in his office. According to Emily, he calmly assured her that the tests were normal, that her heart was strong, and that her symptoms were likely anxiety related to her high-pressure job. Emily left the consultation relieved but also confused. She felt her body betraying her, yet her trusted physician claimed there was nothing fundamentally wrong. Determined to find answers, she followed Dr. Langston's advice: reduce stress, get more sleep, and return if symptoms persisted. Weeks passed, but the chest pains returned with a vengeance. One afternoon, she broke out in cold sweat during a parent-teacher meeting and had to excuse herself. Her husband drove her to an emergency department at a nearby hospital. That night changed everything. Tests performed by emergency physicians revealed abnormal heart rhythms and elevated cardiac enzymes. A cardiologist on duty immediately ordered an angiogram, which disclosed severe narrowing in a major coronary artery. Further genetic testing uncovered a rare form of cardiomyopathy that had eluded detection. Emily required stent placement and months of follow-up care. Shocked and angry, she began to question how Dr. Langston could have missed these signs. In interviews with local reporters, Emily recounted her ordeal, her anguish when hearing normal results, the fear that her heart surgery might leave her debilitated, and the frustration at feeling deceived by someone she had trusted. She posted her story to social media, concluding that Dr. Langston had either been negligent or deliberately dismissive. Her posts went viral in her community. Comments poured in, some sympathetic, some outraged. A few former patients shared similar grievances, claiming they too felt their concerns had been trivialized. Emily's narrative painted Dr. Langston as emblematic of a larger problem: physicians who dismissed patient complaints without adequate investigation. She argued that his refusal to believe her constituted professional misconduct. In her mind, she was not defaming a hero but exposing a vulnerability that could harm others. Friends and relatives supported her stance. They believed that grassroots accountability was necessary in a medical world where hierarchy often protected doctors from criticism. However, skeptics warned Emily of potential fallout. They cautioned that accusing a powerful doctor publicly could backfire, leading to legal repercussions or professional retaliation. Emily, though anxious about the consequences, felt compelled to speak her truth. She believed that her experience could prevent similar tragedies. Little did she know her words would prompt a legal response that would soon engulf them both in a battle neither could have foreseen. Chapter 3: Behind Closed Doors. Doctors' Public Denials. Dr. Robert Langston was not oblivious to the storm brewing online. As the accusations against him multiplied, he found himself fielding calls from hospital administrators and concerned colleagues. Privately, he acknowledged that missing a serious cardiac condition in a patient was a rare and regrettable error, but publicly he maintained that his assessment was accurate. He issued a statement through his attorney denying any negligence. All diagnostic tests were reviewed and interpreted appropriately. The patient's condition was not indicative of cardiomyopathy at the time of examination. In press interviews, Langston appeared composed and confident. He reiterated that he treated Emily with due diligence, ordering appropriate tests and following up on her symptoms. When questioned about the subsequent diagnosis, he attributed it to the unpredictability of certain genetic cardiac conditions that can manifest subtly. Reporters noted his calm demeanor and credentialed background, board-certified in internal medicine and cardiology, published dozens of peer-reviewed articles, and served on national medical committees. Despite his public assertions, the experience rattled him. Behind closed doors, at home, he replayed every moment of Emily's consultation in his mind. He reviewed his notes. Her blood pressure was normal, echocardiogram showed no anomalies, EKG showed slight irregularities but nothing definitive. He recalled telling her it was likely anxiety, guided by her high-stress lifestyle. Could he have missed something? The thought gnawed at him, but he convinced himself that his diagnosis was defensible given the data at hand. As the lawsuit progressed toward trial, Langston's legal team prepared their strategy. They gathered medical records, affidavits from lab technicians, and expert opinions to substantiate that he acted within the standard of care. They anticipated that Emily's defense would hinge on proving he intentionally misled her, which would be difficult without concrete evidence. The doctor understood that if the court accepted his version, the defamation claim could salvage his reputation and perhaps dissuade other patients from making unfounded allegations. Langston also began to brace for public opinion. He reached out to close friends and colleagues for moral support. They reassured him that patient dissatisfaction did not equate to professional misconduct and reminded him of his decades of service. In private conversations, he expressed frustration at what he perceived as a rush to judgment fueled by social media. He lamented that nuanced medical decision-making was often lost in sensational headlines. In the months leading up to trial, Langston attended continuing education seminars, delivered lectures, and maintained his clinical responsibilities. To all appearances, he was the same dedicated physician the community had admired. Yet, he had a secret he guarded closely. He had recently been experiencing unusual fatigue and occasional chest tightness. Initially dismissing these symptoms as stress-related, he sought a second opinion from a colleague. When tests confirmed he had the early stages of the same cardiomyopathy, he began treatment privately. He made no record of his condition in official hospital files, fearing repercussions on his standing and professional credibility. Thus, while publicly steadfast in denying any personal health issues, Dr. Langston privately navigated his own medical crisis. The irony was profound. He sued a patient for defamation based on an illness he denied, all the while hiding from public view his own diagnosis and treatment. He believed that acknowledging his illness risked undermining his defamation lawsuit by lending credibility to Emily's claims. So he held the secret close, determined to control the narrative until the courtroom battle reached its climax. Chapter 4, Courtroom Drama Begins, Lawyers Face Off. The trial commenced on a chilly November morning. The grand, wood-paneled courtroom filled quickly with spectators, local journalists, curious community members, and a smattering of medical professionals. Judge Marianne Sullivan presided, her reputation for meticulous fairness preceding her. Both parties filed into the well, Dr. Langston flanked by his legal team, and Emily escorted by her public defenders. The air was charged with tension as cameras clicked in the gallery. Opening statements set the stage. Dr. Langston's attorney spoke first. He painted a portrait of a doctor of the highest integrity, committed to patient care and medical excellence. He emphasized the gravity of defamation, detailing how Emily's public allegations had damaged Langston's reputation, cost him speaking engagements, and eroded patient trust. The attorney argued that Emily's statements were false, malicious, and harmful. Next, Emily's lead attorney took the floor. She said Emily's intent was not malice but truth-telling. She described Emily's emotional journey from misdiagnosis to near-catastrophic heart event. She framed Emily's allegations as expressions of concern and advocacy for patient rights. The attorney challenged Langston's conduct, suggesting that labeling her condition as anxiety reflected a disregard for patient complaints. She warned the jury not to overlook the power imbalance between a revered doctor and a vulnerable patient. Witnesses began to trickle in. Dr. Langston testified on the first day, recounting his diagnostic process in Emily's case. He explained his interpretation of test results and his rationale for attributing her symptoms to anxiety. He maintained that his decision was justified based on medical evidence available at the time. When Emily's attorney questioned him, he defended his conduct firmly, insisting he acted ethically and competently. Emily took the stand on day 2. Her testimony was emotional. She described the terror she felt when she collapsed in her kitchen, the disbelief when her own doctor had told her nothing was wrong, and the relief mixed with anger when the true diagnosis emerged. Jurors watched as she recounted her fear during emergency surgery and the months of recovery that followed. She maintained that she never intended to defame Dr. Langston but felt compelled to warn others. As direct and cross-examinations continued, the legal team sparred over technical medical details. Expert witnesses offered competing opinions. An eminent cardiologist called by the defense testified that Dr. Langston's interpretation of Emily's tests fell within accepted standards, noting that early cardiomyopathy can escape detection. Meanwhile, Emily's expert described how subtle signs could have prompted further investigation, suggesting a degree of negligence. Tensions rose as the trial moved into its third week. Both sides sensed the importance of every piece of evidence. The judge cautioned the jury to consider only the facts and testimonies presented in court. Outside, media coverage intensified, with pundits speculating about the likely outcome. Community forums buzzed with opinions. Some believed the doctor would prevail, justified in defending his name, others sided with Emily, seeing a patient struggle to be heard. Neither side anticipated the bombshell yet to come. The trial had seemed like a contest over interpretations and intent, but soon it would transform into a reckoning that neither party could fully control. What began as a defamation suit would evolve into an exposé that laid bare the hidden vulnerabilities of the medical profession itself. Chapter 5, Bombshell Evidence, Medical Records Enter the Record. It was the late afternoon of the trial's 20th day when the turning point arrived. Dr. Langston's attorney called for a break after lunch. As court reconvened, a last-minute motion from Emily's counsel demanded the introduction of Langston's own medical records, citing hearsay regarding the doctor's recent health issues. Defense counsel exploded at the motion's audacity, arguing it was irrelevant to the defamation case. Yet the judge, sensing that the records might bear on Langston's credibility concerning patient care, granted a limited review. She ordered redactions to sensitive personal data but allowed details related to his treatment for cardiomyopathy. A hush fell over the courtroom as the clerk approached the bench with a sealed envelope containing the redacted records. The jury watched intently. Judge Sullivan instructed that the records be marked as Exhibit 47 and read privately by the jurors. Both attorneys consulted their notes, hearts pounding. The clerk began to read aloud the pertinent entries: primary care visits documenting chest discomfort, referral notes to a cardiology specialist, test results confirming early cardiomyopathy, and progress notes detailing medication adjustments. Emily's attorneys exchanged triumphant glances. Defense counsel's face drained of color. Dr. Langston, seated at the witness table, managed to maintain composure, but a subtle tremor trembled in his hand as the realization dawned. The jurors absorbed the fact that while Langston had publicly declared Emily's condition a non-issue, he himself had been diagnosed and was undergoing treatment for that same condition. The discrepancy between his public statements and his private medical journey was now starkly apparent. As the clerk continued reading, certain journal entries stood out: a note from Dr. Langston's colleague on June 12, stating, "Dr. Langston presents with fatigue and palpitations, probable early cardiomyopathy. Begin beta blocker." Another entry from a week later noted, "Reviewed test results confirming diagnosis. Patient advised on lifestyle modifications and medication adherence." Each entry was delivered in measured tones, yet none could obscure the seismic impact of this revelation. Emily, sitting in the gallery, felt a rush of vindication. The jury read and reread the pages, whispering among themselves during the reading. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing the procedural whirlwind had transformed into a dramatic unmasking. The courtroom atmosphere crackled with electricity as every observer realized that Langston's credibility was at risk of unraveling. Judge Sullivan asked if either side wished to question further about these records. Emily's attorney requested permission to cross-examine Langston regarding why he had publicly denied having the illness and whether he believed that denial influenced his treatment of Emily. Defense counsel objected, claiming the inquiry was beyond the scope of a defamation suit. The judge overruled the objection. The jury may need to understand any potential bias or motive behind Dr. Langston's public statements. Proceed. What followed was a turning of attention from procedural arguments to ethical and emotional turmoil. Langston, now on the stand again, faced direct questioning about his motives. His defense wavered as he admitted that acknowledging his illness publicly could have jeopardized his professional standing. He explained that his personal crisis had taught him humility, but conceded he had feared losing patient trust if his own diagnosis became known. The jury watched as the respected cardiologist grappled with explaining why he had denied his own condition while dismissing his patient's concerns. The momentum had shifted decisively. The introduction of these records marked a pivotal moment. The defamation trial had morphed into an exploration of truth, hypocrisy, and the vulnerable humanity of those in positions of power. The jurors, now privy to both sides of the story, recognized that this case transcended a simple legal dispute. It posed questions about trust, professional responsibility, and the costs of secrecy. Chapter 6, Revealed, Doctor's Secret Treatment Plan. The morning after the records were introduced, court reconvened to delve deeper into Dr. Langston's private medical file. The jury, still absorbing the bombshell, sat in attentive silence. Emily's attorney began by asking Langston to walk through the timeline of his own symptoms and diagnosis. He described the first signs: a persistent fatigue he attributed to long hours at the hospital, occasional shortness of breath he chalked up to stress, and a series of routine checkups where subtle indicators appeared. He recounted the moment he first noticed irregularities on his own EKG while evaluating a patient's results side by side with his own. A specialist colleague performed an echocardiogram and delivered the news. Langston confessed that he felt a surge of fear and denial, emotions he tried to mask behind professional resolve. He acknowledged that he had continued his practice, often working late into the night, even as he struggled to keep symptoms at bay. Jurors leaned forward as Emily's attorney asked why Langston had publicly characterized her condition as psychosomatic, when he had privately faced the same terrifying reality. Langston's voice faltered as he admitted feeling ashamed and concerned about appearing hypocritical. He said he had wanted to protect his reputation and believed that if his own condition became public knowledge, patients would doubt his ability to provide care. He hesitated, then added, "I thought I could manage things quietly, without impacting my practice." Emily's counsel pressed on, questioning whether Langston's denial of his own illness influenced his decision to downplay Emily's symptoms. He struggled to answer directly, insisting his medical judgment was not affected by his personal fears. Yet he conceded that subconsciously, he may have projected doubts onto Emily's case, preferring to believe her issues were stress-related rather than confronting the possibility that her condition and his might be related. The defense attempted to salvage the situation by calling an expert in medical ethics to testify on behalf of Langston. The expert argued that doctors often keep their own health issues private to avoid shaking patient confidence. He described a code of conduct in which physicians balance transparency with professionalism. According to the expert, Langston's conduct, while unfortunate, did not rise to a level of intentional deception that justified defamation. Emily's team countered with their own expert, a patient advocate and former ethicist, who emphasized that withholding critical health information eroded trust. The advocate detailed how power dynamics in medicine could lead to dismissive attitudes toward patients. She argued that Langston's failure to apply rigorous diagnostic scrutiny to Emily's case while calmly accepting a similar diagnosis for himself constituted a breach of ethical duty. As the day wore on, the jury heard testimony from Langston's cardiology colleague, who confirmed that Langston had been prescribed medication and advised to reduce stress. When asked if Langston had disclosed his condition to any of his patients, the colleague shook her head, stating that Langston had insisted on maintaining a facade of normalcy. The conflicted emotions in the courtroom were palpable. Sympathy for Langston's personal struggle clashed with indignation over his professional duplicity. By late afternoon, jurors had a fuller picture of the doctor's concealed suffering. The narrative that once seemed one-sided now revealed complexity. Both doctor and patient had confronted the same affliction, yet their experiences and responses diverged dramatically. For Emily, it had taken external intervention to receive proper care. For Langston, he had hidden behind credentials to avoid scrutiny. The jury's understanding of truth and deception hinged on these dual perspectives. Chapter 7, Moral and Ethical Fallout, Public Reaction. As news of the medical file revelation spread, public reaction intensified. Major news networks ran headlines questioning Langston's ethics. Medical forums erupted with debate. Was it acceptable for a doctor to conceal his own illness while publicly dismissing a patient's concerns? Social media exploded with commentary from medical professionals, patient advocates, and ordinary citizens. Hashtags like #DoctorConfession and #MedicalEthics trended for days. Patients who had once trusted Dr. Langston began calling his office line, demanding explanations or rescinding appointments. Some praised him for revealing his vulnerability, others condemned him for hypocrisy. The hospital where Langston practiced released a statement acknowledging receipt of the trial records and affirming their commitment to patient-centered care. They indicated an internal review would take place but refrained from passing judgment until the legal process concluded. Medical associations grappled with the fallout. The state medical board convened an emergency session to discuss whether Langston should face disciplinary action for failing to disclose his health status. Some board members argued that a doctor's private medical history was off-limits, while others insisted that transparency was essential to patient trust. Meanwhile, local medical students and residents cited the case in ethics seminars, debating the fine line between privacy and responsibility. Emily's supporters organized a rally outside the courthouse following the revelation. Chanting signs read, "Truth over silence," and "Patients deserve honesty." Speakers included former patients of Langston who shared stories of feeling dismissed or unheard. A local journalist live-streamed the event, interviewing attendees who expressed anger at the perceived arrogance of a doctor who hid his own condition. Conversely, a smaller group of Langston's admirers held a vigil outside the hospital where he worked. They defended his right to medical privacy and applauded his decades of service. One supporter, a former patient whose life he had saved, held a sign stating, "Grateful for Dr. Langston's expertise." The contrasting reactions underscored the emotional complexity of the situation, a revered healer who had become fallible in the eyes of many. In the weeks following the revelation, editorial boards published scathing op-eds. Leading medical ethicists weighed in, discussing the implications for doctor-patient relationships. Some argued that Langston's concealment borderline malpractice, others suggested that physicians, like anyone else, deserved medical privacy. The broader public, largely unaware of the nuances, latched onto the narrative of a doctor who labeled a condition fake while secretly battling it himself. Emily found herself at the center of attention. Talk show producers approached her for interviews, local newspapers wanted exclusive stories. She declined most requests, choosing instead to focus on her recovery and trial preparation. The attention both empowered and exhausted her. Friends cautioned her to be careful, warning that heightened visibility could influence the jury or provoke harassment from Langston's supporters. Throughout this period, Langston retreated from public events. His speaking engagements were cancelled, and his column in a national medical journal was put on hold indefinitely. He retreated into a smaller circle of trusted colleagues who offered moral support. He publicly expressed regret for the personal secrecy but maintained that he had never intended to harm Emily. The toll on his mental health was evident. Interviews revealed dark circles under his eyes and a subdued demeanor that contrasted sharply with his earlier confidence. The public saga had moved beyond the courtroom. It had become a nationwide conversation about power, honesty, and vulnerability in medicine. As the legal battle continued, both doctor and patient navigated a new reality in which their lives had become a symbol of larger ethical dilemmas. More than just a lawsuit, this had become a cultural touchstone, an illustration of how hidden truths can shatter trust and how accountability can come in unexpected ways. Chapter 8: Witness Testimonies, Friends, Family, Experts. With the shock of the exposed records behind them, the trial entered its next phase, a series of witness testimonies that would paint a fuller picture of both Dr. Langston and Emily Turner. Over several days, friends, family members, and professional colleagues took the stand. Their accounts offered intimate glimpses into the characters at the center of this dramatic clash. First to testify was Emily's husband, Michael Turner, a school administrator. He described Emily's symptoms from their earliest appearances, the nagging chest pains, her fluttering heartbeat, and her mounting anxiety. Michael recounted how he urged her to seek medical care when she first mentioned the discomfort. He spoke of his heartbreak watching her grapple with vague assurances from Dr. Langston, only to face a life-threatening diagnosis weeks later. Under cross-examination, he became emotional recalling the moment he learned of her condition and how their family rallied to support her through surgery and rehabilitation. Next, a close friend of Emily, her former colleague Sarah Jennings, testified about Emily's personality and work ethic. She painted Emily as diligent and responsible, a teacher adored by her students. Sarah described how Emily confided her doubts after visiting Langston's office, how she struggled to reconcile a trusted doctor's reassurances with her worsening condition. Sarah's testimony underscored Emily's credibility. She was not a reckless claimant but a concerned patient whose health had been jeopardized. On Dr. Langston's side, his wife, Dr. Helen Langston, a respected neurologist, appeared to speak on behalf of her husband's character. She conveyed Langston's dedication to patient care, recounting how he would arrive home late, exhausted from performing surgeries, yet still review research articles until dawn. She acknowledged her husband's recent health struggles, testifying that he had feared losing professional respect if his diagnosis emerged. Her calm, measured testimony sought to humanize Langston and explain his motivations for secrecy. To balance these personal narratives, medical experts offered their professional assessments. Dr. Anthony Ruiz, a cardiologist unaffiliated with either party, evaluated Langston's diagnostic process regarding Emily. He explained that early-stage cardiomyopathy often presents subtle indicators that can be challenging to detect. He agreed that Langston's initial interpretation of Emily's tests was defensible, but he also emphasized the importance of considering patient history and risk factors that, in Emily's case, might have warranted closer scrutiny. Then came Dr. Lila Patel, an expert in medical ethics, called by Emily's counsel. She criticized Langston's failure to disclose his own diagnosis publicly, arguing it demonstrated a troubling double standard. She suggested that this secrecy could undermine trust in the medical profession. Under cross-examination, she defended her position vigorously, stating that a physician's personal health journey could inform ethical best practices, particularly when similar conditions affected patients. A particularly impactful testimony came from a former patient, James Caldwell, who had previously left a testimonial in support of Langston. After the revelation of Langston's concealment, Caldwell recanted parts of his praise. He admitted that he once believed Langston to be infallible but now felt deceived upon learning of the doctor's private struggle. His conflicted testimony illustrated the emotional fallout, patients grappling with the realization that someone they revered had hidden a truth that mattered to their decision to trust him. As the testimonies unfolded, patterns emerged. Emily was portrayed as a conscientious patient seeking answers, Langston as a brilliant, yet fallible, physician learning to cope with his own mortality. Witnesses painted him as hardworking but increasingly anxious in recent months, fearful of judgment by peers and patients alike. The jury absorbed these contrasting images, recognizing that this case was not a simple matter of black and white wrongdoing. Instead, it was a story of human frailty colliding with professional responsibility. By the end of the week, both sides had laid bare the personal stakes. Emily's supporters emphasized the peril of ignoring patient voices, while Langston's advocates underscored the sanctity of a doctor's privacy. The courtroom had become a microcosm of society's broader struggle to balance empathy with accountability. As closing witness statements concluded, anticipation mounted for the final arguments. Each party prepared to summarize the mosaic of testimonies into a coherent narrative aimed at persuading the jury. Chapter 9, Defendant's Defense, Exposing the Truth. In the final stages of the trial, Emily's defense team rose to deliver their defense. They began by recapping the journey, a patient afflicted with a dangerous heart condition who sought help, only to be told her symptoms were in her mind. They emphasized how Dr. Langston's concealment of his own cardiomyopathy spoke volumes about his attitudes toward those who confided in him. Emily's lead attorney addressed the jury directly, arguing that defamation requires a false statement made with malice or reckless disregard for the truth. The attorney asserted that Langston's denial of his illness, combined with his dismissal of Emily's condition, amounted to malicious intent, an effort to preserve his image at the expense of her well-being. Emily's counsel produced additional evidence, a series of internal clinic emails where Langston referred to psychosomatic cases and stressed maintaining a tough demeanor to avoid reputational damage. The emails did not mention Emily by name but revealed a pattern of dismissiveness. The defense contended that this attitude had influenced Langston's decision-making in Emily's case. Emily herself delivered a brief but impactful statement. She spoke directly to the jury, her voice steady yet emotional. She recounted her suffering in simple terms: fear, uncertainty, and the betrayal of being told she was imagining her illness. She asked the jury to consider not only legal definitions of defamation but broader questions of accountability. "Doctors hold immense power over our lives," she said. "When that power is wielded without empathy or honesty, lives are at stake." Dr. Langston's defense came next. His attorney emphasized that the core issue was not his personal medical history but whether Emily's statements were false. He outlined how subsequent diagnosis challenges even the most skilled specialists and reiterated that Langston had acted reasonably at every turn. The attorney urged the jury to separate Langston's private struggles from his professional conduct. A doctor's health status does not automatically invalidate his clinical judgment, he argued. No evidence shows Dr. Langston intended to harm Ms. Turner. He did not defame her, he simply gave his best medical opinion. Langston then addressed the court himself. His voice resonated with remorse and fatigue. He apologized for any pain he had caused Emily but insisted there had been no malice. "I am a healer," he said. "I have dedicated my life to saving hearts. When I missed her diagnosis, I was devastated. But I never wanted to harm her name. My failure was a medical error, not a smear campaign." He admitted misjudging how his public comments would affect Emily but maintained he had been driven by fear and shame rather than malice. As closing arguments unfolded, both sides invoked different notions of truth and responsibility. Emily's team painted a picture of a power imbalance exploited by a doctor who saw admitting error as riskier than defending his pride. Langston's counsel argued that mistakes happen in medicine and that punishment for honest errors leads to defensive practice, harming patient care. The jury listened intently, aware that their deliberations would ripple beyond a single verdict. In the jury's gaze, the case had shifted from simple defamation to a broader debate about trust, transparency, and the human cost of secrecy. Emily's plight underscored the dire consequences when a physician dismisses patient concerns. Langston's admission of hiding his illness laid bare the universal fear of vulnerability. Ultimately, the jury's challenge was to weigh empathy against legal precedent and determine if Langston's actions met the threshold of defamation under the law. Chapter 10, Verdict and Aftermath, Who Wins and Who Loses. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a decision. The courtroom fell silent as the foreperson stood to read the verdict. On the charge of defamation, the jury found in favor of Emily Turner. They concluded that Dr. Langston's public statements about Emily's condition were made recklessly, disregarding the possibility that her symptoms could be valid. The judge asked if they had reached a determination on damages. The jury awarded Emily nominal damages to establish her right to vindication but also acknowledged the complexities involved, issuing an apology to both parties for their difficult decision. For Emily, the verdict was a moment of relief and bittersweet justice. She exhaled deeply as her attorney led her out of the courtroom. The satisfaction of winning the case was tempered by the realization that her life had been upended by a disease nearly masked by another's denial. Media cameras swarmed as reporters asked for her reaction. She spoke softly, "Today's verdict is about more than me. It's about patients everywhere who deserve to be heard and believed." She declined further interview requests, retreating to the quiet corner of the courthouse steps to share a hug with her husband. Dr. Langston, stunned by the outcome, rose from the witness table in disbelief. His attorney consoled him, reminding him that the case was decided on narrow legal grounds. In private, Langston grappled with the emotional fallout. He had hoped the truth of his own condition would elicit empathy rather than condemnation. Instead, he felt exposed and vulnerable. His wife met him outside the courtroom, embracing him tightly as he fought back tears. Reporters shouted questions, but he refused to comment. In the weeks that followed, Langston faced professional consequences. The medical board opened an inquiry into his conduct, reviewing whether his failure to disclose his condition and his handling of Emily's diagnosis warranted disciplinary action. Hospital administrators placed him on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Lectures were cancelled, honors rescinded, and colleagues distanced themselves. The once celebrated cardiologist found his reputation fractured. Emily, on the other hand, returned to her teaching position with a renewed sense of purpose. She became an advocate for patient rights, speaking at conferences about the importance of believing patient concerns. She collaborated with medical ethics groups to develop guidelines for handling patient complaints and shared her story to raise awareness. Her recovery continued, and she gradually regained strength. Though the emotional scars remained, she took solace in knowing her experience catalyzed change. Public opinion remained divided. Some hailed the verdict as a triumph of transparency and accountability in medicine. Others lamented it as a dangerous precedent that could encourage frivolous lawsuits and promote a culture of suspicion. Editorial boards published follow-up pieces questioning whether the legal system was the right forum for unresolved medical disputes. Langston's defenders argued that the verdict would discourage physicians from candidly discussing cases, fostering defensive medicine. Amid the turmoil, the hospital announced a new policy requiring physicians to disclose significant health issues that could affect their practice. Patient advocacy groups applauded the policy as a step toward rebuilding trust. Langston, grappling with guilt and shame, began writing a memoir detailing his journey through illness, professional conflict, and personal growth. He hoped that by sharing his full story, others might learn from his mistakes and recognize the importance of honesty in healing. Emily's life also experienced unexpected opportunities. A documentary filmmaker approached her to produce a short film about her ordeal. She agreed, seeing it as another platform to highlight patient concerns. Her story resonated with audiences nationwide, sparking discussions about medical humility and the need for systemic change. As she spoke at events and engaged with patients directly, she found purpose in using her experience to empower others. Though the trial concluded, its ripple effects continued. The medical community re-evaluated how to balance physician privacy with patient safety. Dr. Langston's case became a cautionary tale taught in medical schools and ethics seminars. Patients, armed with Emily's story, felt emboldened to seek second opinions and ask tough questions. The legal precedent, though narrow, signaled that doctors could be held accountable for dismissive conduct when it verged on reckless disregard for patient well-being. Chapter 11, Lessons Learned, Accountability in Medicine. In the months and years after the trial, several key lessons emerged. First, the importance of listening to patients became a rallying cry. Medical institutions implemented training programs emphasizing empathetic communication and thorough investigation of patient complaints, even when initial tests appear normal. Physicians learned that dismissing concerns could have dire consequences, both medically and legally. Second, transparency about physician health gained traction. While doctors have a right to privacy, the case underscored that significant health issues, particularly those related to one's specialty, require thoughtful disclosure. Hospitals and clinics began exploring policies to encourage physicians to share relevant health information with supervisors and patients when safety could be impacted. Peer support groups emerged, allowing doctors to discuss their own health struggles without fear of judgment. Third, the power dynamics between doctors and patients received renewed scrutiny. Legal experts noted that patients often felt intimidated in medical settings, reluctant to question authority. Initiatives aimed at empowering patients, through advocacy programs, educational materials, and patient liaisons, grew in popularity. Health systems recognized that fostering a culture of mutual respect and open dialogue could prevent cases like Emily's. Fourth, the trial highlighted the role of social media in shaping medical narratives. Emily's initial posts went viral, propelling her story into the public sphere and influencing the course of events. Physicians were reminded to be cautious when responding to online criticism and to consider how evolving digital platforms affect doctor-patient interactions. Medical associations developed guidelines for professional conduct on social media, emphasizing respectful engagement and verification of facts. Fifth, legal boundaries around defamation and medical malpractice became clearer. Courts acknowledged that while not every misdiagnosis constitutes defamation, reckless dismissal of patient claims, especially when evidence suggests otherwise, could cross the line. The case prompted legal scholars to explore the intersection between free speech, patient advocacy, and professional reputation. Law schools integrated the case into curricula, discussing how language and intent shape defamation claims. Dr. Langston's personal journey offered a poignant reminder that even highly trained professionals are subject to the same vulnerabilities as their patients. His memoir, published a year after the trial, recounted his inner turmoil, the shame of illness, the fear of professional ruination, and the painful realization that hiding one's pain can hurt others. He wrote candidly about grappling with identity, once defined solely by his medical prowess, now tempered by humility. Emily's ongoing advocacy work built bridges between patients and providers. She collaborated with medical schools to speak to future physicians about listening without bias. She co-founded a nonprofit providing resources for patients to navigate complex medical systems and access appropriate second opinions. Her efforts became a beacon for those who had felt ignored or marginalized in healthcare. In retrospect, the trial's aftermath revealed that accountability in medicine is not solely a matter of legal remedy but of cultivating a culture of empathy, transparency, and respectful collaboration. Doctors learned that admitting error and vulnerability can strengthen trust rather than weaken it. Patients gained validation that speaking up can lead to meaningful change. While Dr. Langston's career never fully recovered its previous luster, he eventually returned to practice with a renewed sense of purpose, serving not only as a healer but as an advocate for open dialogue between doctors and patients. The story of Dr. Robert Langston and Emily Turner stands as an enduring reminder: the path to healing extends beyond treatments and procedures. It encompasses listening, acknowledging frailty, and embracing the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. In the delicate dance between doctor and patient, honesty remains the most potent medicine.